All right, it's 7:02. I think we can get started. I want to thank everyone for joining our program tonight. We are about to have an incredibly powerful evening together. My name is Maria Friedman, and I'm the Executive Director of the Rhode Island Coalition for Israel, or RICI for short, and we are co-hosting this webinar tonight together with the Atlanta Israel Coalition, AIC. Both of our organizations are grassroots nonprofits dedicated to combating Jew hatred or anti-Semitism, educating about Israel, and strengthening the alliance between the US and Israel. In addition to hearing these impactful stories, we're going to take collective action together by demanding accountability for Americans murdered abroad by terrorists, and we will be circulating those two petition links that will help us do just that. Before we hear from our panelists, I just want to give a few Zoom housekeeping tips. There's a button at the bottom of your screen called Q&A where you can submit questions. So please submit questions for any or multiple speakers throughout the presentation. And at the end, we will try to take as many questions as we can. Also, keep your eyes on the Zoom chat where we will be posting helpful links and ways for you to take action. Lastly, keep in mind that opinions expressed by the speakers may not necessarily reflect those of the co-sponsoring organizations. So with that, I'll turn it over to Cheryl Dorchinsky, which is the founding director of Atlanta Israel Coalition, to introduce our first speaker.
Hi, everybody. Thanks again for being here. Tonight is going to be a very powerful night, and I appreciate everybody for being here. I appreciate our speakers, Mark Goldfeder, Tahar Toof, Arnold Roth, and Kathleen Lucan. We're starting tonight off with Kathleen Lucan, whose sister, Christine, was murdered in a terrorist attack. Kathleen, we'll need you to turn off mute, sweetie.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, thank
Okay,
you.
thank you for having me tonight, Cheryl. I'm going to go ahead and read what I've written about my sister. As identical twins, saying we were close would be an understatement. We began life together in the womb with a bond deeper than others might imagine. Unbeknownst to my parents, at my sister's birth, suddenly 2 minutes later, there I was. Surprise! Christine was not surprised. We were cozy in the womb for 8 months, and it turned out to be just right. It wasn't crowded. We only weighed 3 pounds each. Our bond grew stronger day by day as we learned to talk and walk and even developed our own language. Almost all learning experiences and memories were made together. While a lot alike, God made us unique individuals with different fingerprints. Christine was a very passionate person with an intensity that was contagious and a smile to match it. As my dad always said, she and I never met a stranger. She easily connected with people and quickly made others feel at ease, seen, and valued, a real gift. She loved the Bible, horses, exercising, gardening, cooking, reading, languages, and a great love for all things outdoors. Christine was different, her values and what was important to her. She was happy and always full of encouragement. Her joy for God was contagious and overflowed onto all those around her. She enthusiastically introduced me to the lover of her soul, and several years later, I also said yes and I do, and joined her in this dance. We started a new journey together, even closer than our bond as twin sisters, now sisters in Jesus. When Christine began to learn about the Jewish roots of her Christian faith, another seismic shift occurred in her life. The Bible came alive to her in a way she had never experienced before. The more she learned, the more she wanted to learn, and she was voracious. Christine absorbed all she could about the land of Israel and its people. An opportunity arose to take a tour of Israel in 2007, and from that day forward, she was never the same. Christine was smitten. She fell in love with the land of the Bible, the places Yeshua walked, the culture, and the people. She even set her she even set her sights on learning Hebrew. She described how sad and heavy her heart was when she looked out the windows of plain departed Israel. She prayed earnestly and believed God called her to Israel. She dared to trust him as she journeyed towards her passion to live permanently in Israel. Christine loved the book of Ruth and quoted these words often from the book. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. To explain how she felt about God's call to the land of Israel and its people. She began her faith-filled journey with twists and turns, ups and downs, roadblocks, discouragement, and disappointments, all into the unknown. She was on her way to Israel by the way of the UK, a circuitous route, yet not dissuaded. She said one time she felt a bit like Abraham when God called him to leave his land and his people and to go to unknown land. She left her very secure federal job, her family, her country, her life, and all she owned to follow God. She didn't look back and was undaunted by the hardships. She set her face like flint, characteristic of her tenacity. Sadly, Christine's earthly life was taken in the land she loved. Christine had come across a poem called Gate of the Year by Minnie Louise Haskins only a few years before her passing. She cherished the words and said she hid them in her heart. Go into the darkness and put your hand into the hand of God, and that shall be better than light and safer than a known way. This is exactly what she bravely did. My heart grieves that I will not celebrate Christine's wedding day as she did mine. I didn't know it would be the last time I saw her. Tragically, it was. Her fervent prayer and desire was to marry a Jewish man who all live in Israel. I lost my best friend and womb mate, as she called us. I'd hoped we would grow old together and share this precious life God had blessed us with, but I'm so comforted that while we are apart now, I will see her again for all eternity. Christine's passion for Israel and his people didn't take her life. Her life was taken by evil men who have a visceral and irrational hatred for Jewish people. Christine loved, supported, cared for, and stood with his people. Her life was taken as one of them, not God's will, but the will of hateful men. I know Christine would have chosen, as I have, to forgive these men for taking her life. Unforgiveness only poisons me. They are in prison, whether walking free or behind bars. While knowing the release of Ayad by Israel was undoubtedly complicated and presumably weighed against the release of precious hostages, doing so led us to this place of crisis we are now in. Communicating with Tall and my family prior to the release would have given our families time to process the events that were unfolding, but sadly, there was no communication. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. I know it's not easy to talk about, and we appreciate it. So I'm going to go to Tal now, Hartouf. She is a tour guide, a musician, an artist, and an all-around incredible human being and advocate. And I guess I'm going to ask you, why is it so important, Tal, to get justice? You were there that day when these monsters
Yeah,
took
these
Christine's life.
savages, this unforgivable deed. Well, in Judaism, there's something called mitzvat tzedakah, which is the commandment of charity. It's not really a very good word translation, but charity is taking care of your brother or sister financially, somebody who's struggling, to alleviate their suffering. And it doesn't come out of feeling good, I just want to be kind and compassionate. It's actually a moral obligation, regardless of what we feel. And I've always found it kind of fascinating that this word, tzedakah, in English, charity, is it's the same root, the same letters as the word justice in Hebrew. And I'm thinking, one of the kindest, most alleviating things, helpful things you can do for certainly somebody. I'm not speaking for anyone else here, I'm speaking for myself. One of the most important things that can be done to alleviate my mental anguish is justice. And justice in that sense is kind, it's good, it's sweet, it's righteous, it's the right thing to do. And listening to Kathleen there, I mean, we really haven't spoken together about this life-changing event, except for on the 10-year memorial. And I felt like, I felt like my heart was being ripped out and then rubbed up and down on a cheese grater. So Kathleen, thank you. That was very courageous of you to do this. And while we're doing the thanks, Cheryl, thank you, and Atlantic Coalition, and also everyone who's bothered to turn up. I was scrolling through the names and very delighted to see some friends who've stood by me all these years. And if I think about it, then if I jot up, if I add up the amount of time I knew Christine, all right, I first met her when I was co-guiding a historical tour of Jewish life in pre-war Poland. It was an ecumenical tour. And as a tour guide, it's not ethical to hang around with everybody, individuals in the group, but I had a coffee with her on the last evening. So that's 2 hours. And it was then when I said, she said, oh, she wants to come to Israel. And I'm thinking, so I told her, yeah, come and stay, come for a long weekend. I'll be your tour guide. I could have done with the work. And I wanted to show her the alternative Israel, the hiking, the wineries, that kind of stuff. So we got 2 hours there. There were phone calls leading up to her visit. She arrived on the Friday night, very late, pretty much went to sleep and got up late. And I guess I was with her 6 hours that day before she was murdered. So if I, as I said, if I jot up the hours or the time I knew Christine, she had a conversation with her, it couldn't have been more than 12 hours. So I don't want to claim here, although I felt I lost a friend, I'm not going to go down the vicarious grief, the unimaginable grief that Kathleen is dealing with, which can be a fuel for good. But I think the fuel that is driving me to do this, not so much grief, it's, I was a victim of mind-blowing, unfathomable violence, and also mental torture in the forest that day, where your fate lies in the balance. And I was also witness to somebody who endured unfathomable violence and mental torture. So what's driven me here is not this overwhelming grief per se that a twin sister, an identical twin, would feel. It's rage. It's just rage at the sheer injustice of it all. Maria, I think we got a little 23-second video.
Yes.
Can we play that and then I'll babble on?
ليش جيتوا على المنطقة هاي؟ جينا نقتل. تقتل مين يا عود؟ ليه؟ بس هذا جينا نقتل. شو السبب؟ ما في سبب.
Well, that's a real movie, right? That is taken from when the police took this savage back to the forest. They recorded everything, okay? Like where were the weapons, where, the confession. And look, on a macro level, that's a 23-second explanation of the Israeli-Arab conflict. Why did you kill? Oh, we just wanted to kill who? Jews. Any reason? No reason. And you don't need to read any other history book. This is that ongoing war, which is actually the name of Arnold's blog. And in that sense, Kathleen spoke. I'm listening to Kathleen. I mean, it's like we're from two different countries, two different cultures, two different creeds. Yet Christine, like Taylor Force, like these Thai workers on October the 7th, Christine's family, Kathleen's family, because of what happened to them, and despite the differences, there's a shared fate and destiny, really, that whether you like it or not, Kathleen, you and your family are tied up with the Jewish nation. Just want to take you through a profile of this murder and where things stand today. I'm not going to regurgitate what happened to me, but there are some details that you need to know for the sake of what I'm going to say. So we were attacked by two terrorists, one of whom I stabbed, and his DNA led to his apprehension. Okay, and his name is Iyad Fatafta, or as a good friend here on Zoom likes to say, Fathead. So Iyad Fatafta, and he was arrested very, very quickly after the murder, within 24 hours. And under a little bit of persuasive interrogation, he soon gave the name of his partner in crime, and they were both arrested very, very quickly. And in that interrogation, as with any interrogation of terrorists, they are asked who they affiliate with. That's how this society works. They all have a political, let's call it political, right? But an affiliation. They're either with Hamas or with Islamic Jihad or whatever. So Kifach Renimat, which is the one still in prison, he was affiliated with Hamas. Iyad Fatafta, the one who's been let out, he was affiliated with Fatah. And Fatah are the political party of the so-called moderate Palestinian Authority. Okay, this is the moderate. This savagery is the moderate. So he's Fatah. So they're sentenced. And what happens when these people are sentenced is that the Israeli prison society puts them in together with their other groups, their other factions. So all the Hamas are together, all the Fatah are together. And indeed, they were put in together. And as you know, while they are in prison, they receive a salary up to, I think, starting point $3,000 a month, which, by the way, for the non-Israelis here, $3,000 a month is double what people like myself get and other survivors of terrorism as a disability stipend. Okay, so I see the names on the Zoom. You know, I've been speaking about this for years, and that's what I did as soon as I was physically able to really stand up and get on a plane. I spoke about the salaries with limited success, just a couple of countries in Europe. And of course, President Trump on his first term passed the Taylor Force Act, which was amazing. And I'm talking now between the time they're incarcerated up until whatever year we're in now. So that was a big thing. I was doing the public speaking. And then one day, because I'm in Terror Town and it's a whole new social orbit, I met Arnold, who's going to speak to us in a minute. And I'd obviously, who didn't know about that terrible bombing and the murder of Arnold's daughter? And I remember coming away thinking, I mean, we're so terribly egocentric, at least I am, but I remember thinking, oh, if there's any consolation, at least my boys are still inside, all right? And that was going to change. Now, a couple of years after the sentencing, by the way, Iyad Fatafta was sentenced to 35 years life for the murder of Christine and 20 years for my attempted murder. The other one was sentenced to 120 years. He'd murdered before, he'd done attempted murders, a terrible CV. So they're both put in prison. And then one day the state attorney calls me and he says, you know what, Iyad Fatafta is appealing his sentence. I couldn't understand, and I had to go to the High Court. And basically the appeal was this, that, I mean, I had to see him again. And he was appealing the fact that he was given too many years. He wanted the life sentence given for Christine's murder. He wanted that taken away. Why? And quote, not verbatim because it was in Arabic. It wasn't fair because he had only stabbed the American a few times. They came back to ensure we were dead, and they exchanged places. So he was contesting that he shouldn't have a life sentence because of the amount of times that he stabbed Christine. All right. Of course, that was thrown out of the High Court. Trotting along a couple of years, few years, I think in 2017, I get all these weird phone calls from various people in important positions, and then the FBI call me, and I have to meet them just outside Tel Aviv. And they hand me an affidavit issued by the District Court of Columbia, stating that there is enough evidence, which would be forensic. It was all over me. His blood was all over me. It's all over the weaponry, which they dug out in the forest. There's his own confession. They proudly said, we want to murder Jews. They've proudly said in court they'd do it again. So you have the forensic evidence, his confession and my testimony. And in that affidavit, it says there is enough evidence this is 2017, should they ever be released in any future deal, there's enough evidence to arrest them. And that was a very powerful document to have. And okay, that's it. I've got that affidavit. Heaven forbid anything would happen, but at least they're going to get arrested. And at that particular time, I think in 2020, 3 years later, I decided to step down from public life. I didn't feel I couldn't do anything else about anything. And as you know, I changed my name and I started doing other things, which was very wholesome for me. And then October the 7th happened. I'm not going to talk about that war, but just as a public speaker, apart from the shock of us all, I was listening to we call it in Hebrew asbara, our PR, and I'm thinking, this is a disaster. This is a disaster. And I managed to get on several international media, and my point was this, all right, and it's relevant here. One of the most terrible mistakes Israel did from a policy view is call it the war against Hamas, which is not true. We know that it was Hamas. We know it was Islamic Jihad. We know it was the PLFP. And we know it was Fatah, to which Iyad Fatah belongs. And it was these thousands of so-called innocent civilians. And I felt that if that's not addressed, the Palestinian Authority are being portrayed as moderates. And I know from the scars on my flesh that they are not moderate. And I realized if we're going to present one side as moderate, then they're soon going to be fetching about a Palestinian state. And indeed, 2 years later, that's exactly what happened. And then we're jumping along to October 2025. The hostages are still in captivity, and talks of a deal and a painful price comes up, which is something I never understood the talk of a deal. I simply didn't understand why we didn't go to Qatar, like on the day of the war, and say, you're hosting the Hamas leadership, you funded Hamas, we'll give you 48 hours. I don't understand why we didn't do that. And so therefore I didn't understand this, how did we get to the point where we're making deals with these people? But nevertheless, the talk of a painful price. And I'm expecting, even though I've been here years, you expect some phone call, right, from some important authority. And I didn't find out that way. Kathleen actually said that. I found out that Iyad Fatah had been released. I found that out on Google. And then from there, I've been trying to trace him. I know they were hosted, all of them were hosted free of charge at the Marriott Hotel in Egypt. If you stay in hotels, please boycott the Marriott. I found his brother's Facebook post where in the hotel he's gloating about what he did. And just look at him again, it was like that line from Paradise Lost, where John Milton says, darkness visible. And that's what it felt like. And by hook and by crook, I managed to get an email of the Deputy Assistant for the President and Senior Director for Counterterrorism, Dr. Sebastian Gorka. I sent him all the files and he was amazing. He answered within 48 hours. That was back in October. And then I emailed again. The waiting period was a bit longer. And the last email I got is something to the effect of, "Oh, we're working on this with an ironclad fist," but nobody's ever assigned me any liaison. There's no initiative there. And so my only outlet has been to basically troll American officials on social media. Name and shame. One would be like Leo Terrell, who's working to combat anti-Semitism. And when he was here, he just completely ignored me. Although I got the Jewish lobby, spreading this stuff around, so to try and enforce a meeting, which was ignored. And I think my experience is actually what Arnold will tell us about now. So the only thing I know now is that he is. I spoke with intelligence a couple of days ago, and there's every reason to believe that he is still somewhere in Egypt. And that's why this, to go back to Cheryl, that was a long answer, Cheryl, to your question, but this is why justice is so important. This is the kind of savagery we're dealing with, the unforgivable savagery, and and it's a community obligation. It's what it means to be Jewish. May I say one more thing? It's like when I went for a walk in the forest that day, I mean, I always knew I was Jewish, no surprise there. But if I'm going to like metaphorically, what would you say? If I'm going to summarize what's happened to me over 15 years, I might have gone for a walk in the forest, but when I'm pulverized and nearly bludgeoned to death and I managed to stand up, I stood up as a Jew. I was no longer Jewish. I was the Menachem Begin Jew, one of 3,000 years of civilized history who will die for our ethics. And that's what I want to convey to you, my fellow Jews, and also for Christians on here, that we have a moral obligation to do justice. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that message should go to everyone. And just to be clear, what Tal was trying to say was that these people have been paid to murder innocent people in Israel, these terrorists. And right now, one of them is free. So we've provided the links below. Please sign if you have any connections, anything that you want to do to help move the needle forward, contact me. Because united, I truly believe we can get anything done together. So now I'd like to introduce Arnold Roth. I wish I was introducing him for a reason other than the fact that he hasn't gotten justice for his beautiful daughter, who you could see in the picture. Her name was Malki, and she was murdered in the Sbarro bombing that took place in Israel. Arnold, thank you for being here. You've had a long road now that you've been fighting to get some justice for your daughter, to get these monsters, the monster, I believe she's in Jordan, extradited to the United States. Would you like to share a bit with us, please? And you're on mute. Thank you.
Let me start by saying thank you to Cheryl and Maria and the organizations that have put together what is a classic of grassroots activism, precisely the kind of thing that the journey that I'm on and my wife and I have been on for years absolutely need, given the utter failure of the people who were paid to be leaders. We need more of this kind of an event. We're right on the eve of the 25th anniversary of the August 9th, 2001 Hamas bombing of the Sbarro Pizzeria in central Jerusalem. And I'm sitting here at this, I have to say, uncomfortable hour. For those who are not tuned into the realities of the Middle East, it's 2:30 in the morning here. And I'm here to address the continuing failure of the United States to secure justice for its own citizens murdered in that attack. 2 decades of seeking accountability have passed by. Brave statements from Washington insiders notwithstanding, justice remains scandalously withheld. My 15-year-old daughter, Malka Chana Roth, you can see her in the picture. We always called her Malki, an American citizen, a talented musician, a sunny, devoted young woman, was one of the 16 innocents killed when a guitar case bomb, I always refer to it as a human bomb because the bomb was carried on the shoulders of a man who went there to blow himself up, in order to kill other people, to murder other people. Guitar case bomb packed with explosives and nails detonated in the crowded restaurant during the summer vacation. 3 Americans died, including Malki, and dozens more were maimed. My comments here are structured, so I've just mentioned the anniversary, and I'm going to now mention the mastermind, the spearhead, the central figure. The mastermind, the preferred definition that I use of the bombing, dispatched and equipped by Hamas. She was their very first female terrorist, was Ahlam Tamimi, then a 21-year-old Jordanian student and part-time television newsreader. She scouted Jerusalem's streets in advance, seeking and selecting a target as filled as possible with Jewish children. That was her mission. Tamimi then personally escorted the human bomb, a young, freshly religious zealot with an explosives-filled guitar case, to Jerusalem from their starting point in the Fatah stronghold city of Ramallah into bustling Jerusalem, and then by foot to the busy pizzeria in the heart of the city. On television and on the internet, she's recreated with glee the key moments, how her media pass and their Western-style clothing got them past the security check on the road into Jerusalem, on how she told her human bomb to walk inside the utterly unsecured pizza place, no guards in those days, and to busy himself with studying the menu for a minute or two so she could get safely away. About how the car radio inside the taxi van she took to get back to Ramallah reported on the rising death toll, starting with terribly small numbers of dead, and then to the joy of the other passengers, a larger toll, one to be really proud of. She ended the day being the main newsreader on an Arab TV station called Al Istiqlal, where she struggled not to show her immense pride, reading the reports of the carnage in a TV moment perhaps unique in history, a massacre reported out of the mouth of the person who personally carried it out. I have the video. Tamimi has lived openly in Amman, the capital of Jordan, since 2011. For years, she hosted a weekly television program from there, engineered to be her personal platform, beamed throughout the Arab world from Jordan, which many of you will know exercises some of the tightest, most restrictive media policies in the world. Nothing goes to air ever without prior approval of the regime that owns and runs the kingdom. Tamimi's weekly show, whose Arabic name translates to Breezes of the Free, sounds like afternoon television in the United States, unabashedly celebrated terror, terrorists, and anti-Israel, anti-Jewish savagery. She was its face for 5 years. She still appears in the Jordanian media today, an icon and a celebrity, whose role in the atrocity continues to be depicted as heroic resistance, an ongoing inspiration to proud, ambitious, young Jordanians. Her role, her fame, her murderous influence, all of these have never once been condemned or even criticized by any voices of Jordan's government. Because I'm working to a very tight number of minutes of speaking and then shutting up, I'll skip the part where all over the world I keep hearing people say, Jordan, why? They are our moderate partners in the Middle East. Jordan, they're a bright light in the desert. Jordan, they're led by enlightened people, people you can get along with, people you can interview on CNN and feel good about it afterwards. That's the Jordan I'm talking about. Let me move to what getting justice done means. In 2013, and here I'll skip my own role in this, which was actually quite central, the US Department of Justice issued criminal charges against Tamimi for conspiring to murder Americans. Those charges were never notified to us and were immediately sealed. I've used the word sealed a lot of times, and I know the blank look that comes over audiences. So I always hasten to explain that sealed means it was kept secret. No one knew about it. I didn't know about it. The government didn't know about it. The Congress, where I spoke, giving testimony to a committee dealing with national security, didn't know about it. No one knew about it. Only in 2017 were the charges unsealed, and she was immediately named an FBI most wanted terrorist with a $5 million reward on her head. Again, since I'm a little bit ahead of my budget here in terms of time, I want everyone to at least think, because you can't yell out the answer as you could in a room, how many FBI most wanted terrorists there are in the whole world at this moment. People have told me 5,000, but it's 22, and there's only one woman, and it's her. So she's not only an FBI most wanted terrorist, but she also has, and this is somewhat counterintuitive, a $5 million reward on her head. I say counterintuitive because if we have a central address for our problems in the United States, it's at the State Department, and it's the State Department that issued the reward. On the other hand, true to the rough experience, the really unbearable and unjustifiable experience that my wife and I have had at the hands of the State Department, no one at the State Department has ever spoken to us about that reward. I left messages there in 2017, and I'm sure they're going to get back to me now any day. In 2017, the charges were then unsealed, and less than a week later, a Jordanian appellate court ruled that a technical failure by Jordan, this is a Jordanian court ruling that a technical failure by its own country meant that the kingdom's Keystone Treaty with the United States, dating back to 1995 and the Clinton administration, had been invalid and was still invalid, even though Jordan could have fixed the technical problem every day and still can today. That technical problem meant that even though Jordan had repeatedly extradited terrorists to the United States, including terrorists who are still in prison in the United States today, they couldn't do it in this case. And this case is really just the same as all the others, if you ignore the fact that this case is all about Jewish children. They could have fixed the technical problem every day and still can today. No media has ever reported that. It's a legal conclusion, the decision of the appellate court. They call it the Court of Cassation in Jordan. It's a legal conclusion that no lawyer practicing public international law, and certainly no court outside Jordan, takes seriously. But it's enough of a fig leaf so that Tamimi can be credibly treated as a free citizen, indeed as she is, inside Jordan and outside the reach of the US Justice Department and the FBI. Jordan and the United States have been extradition treaty partners since 1995. Jordan has routinely extradited terrorists under the so-called invalid treaty. Tamimi, a media veteran, remains free and famous, continuing to inspire violence in its most murderous form in ways that people not as endowed with media experience and capability as she is and has and does could get away with. The United States provides Jordan with generous military and economic aid at levels that place it at the very top of the taxpayer-funded ladder. Successive US administrations, including the current one, have issued occasional statements mildly urging justice. To be frank with you, I generally tremble as I say those words. The very notion of American officials mildly urging justice in a case as egregious, as shocking, as unacceptable, as outrageous as this one, it's very hard for anyone, but certainly for the father of one of the victims, to hand off in a calm and reasonable way without starting to foam at the mouth, which is the way I think most people look at me. I don't foam at the mouth. But justice has still not happened. Let me say a word or two about the heart of the problem. There's a deliberate policy choice in Washington that lies behind what I've just described. Geopolitical expediency is being allowed to override justice for American victims and the imperative of deterring further attacks. Justice should have been done for my daughter. It's been defeated. That's the right word. And no one is prepared to acknowledge that, let alone to consider why it's happened. There's almost zero discussion about the costs of letting Malki's killer remain beyond reach of the United States authorities. My wife and I have begged Congress, the State Department, the White House, and about 15 different acronyms here on the screen, to treat enforcement of the extradition treaty as a non-negotiable priority. Let me translate that into simple words. There's a treaty. Why is Jordan being allowed to trample it and violate it? That's exactly what's been happening. Justice for Malki and for the other Sbarro victims is a test of US resolve in confronting terrorism and defending its citizens, and don't allow any politician to raise any question about how accurate what I just said is. Thank you for being here in this webinar. The lawmakers, the leaders, the diplomats, the policy experts inside the Washington Beltway have failed for years to get this savage to US justice. Your participation here, your presence, and the growing awareness created by grassroots events like tonight's are our hope. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Arnold. So, just to be clear, we've mentioned Jewish quite a few times on this call, but this is truly a humanitarian crisis. Christine Lukin was not Jewish. Taylor Force, who had a law named after him, not Jewish. Terrorists should pay regardless of what their victims' religions are. Now we're very fortunate to have Mark Goldfeder with us. He's the director of the National Jewish Advocacy Center. And I asked Mark if you can tell us a bit about yourself. And I really want to ask you, are these the first cases you've heard about this with, Americans who have been murdered by terrorists overseas?
So first, I want to express again my sincere condolences to the families of the victims. May God bring you both comfort and justice. I'm going to talk quickly and frankly and without much emotion because, as you'll see, I believe that what we can do, what we need to do to get justice requires that. So everything the United States needs in order to arrest the people who murdered Christine and Malki already exists, and it has existed for years. There's a statute, Title 18, Section 2332. Whoever kills a national of the U.S. while that national is outside the U.S. may be punished by death. There's a court, the Federal District Court in Washington, and there's a judge who reads the evidence and who found probable cause in those cases. There's arrest warrants, they're signed, they're outstanding, they're unexpired. And there's a precedent out of that same courthouse on facts that are so close to Christine's, it's painful, where the U.S. did exactly this and they won. So what's never existed is the will. And that's not a gap in the law. That's, for some reason, a choice. And I'll tell you about a man named Zayed Safrarini. In 1986, Safrarini led the hijacking of Pan Am 73 on the tarmac at Karachi. He selected an American passenger, a young man named Rajesh Kumar, and he executed him, and he pushed his body down the stairs in front of the security forces. 20 people died before it was over. Pakistan caught him, and they tried him, and they sentenced him to death, which then became life, which in Pakistan turned out to be 14 years. But meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., a federal grand jury indicted him in August of 91, and the Justice Department did something that required no foreign government permission at all. It sealed the indictment and it just waited 9 years. And in the spring of 2000, when Pakistan began saying out loud that the term was nearly up, the prosecutors went to the district court and they had it unsealed. And Pakistan released him in 2001. FBI agents arrested him the following day, not in Karachi, in Bangkok on his way to Jordan, because somebody at Main Justice cared enough to think about where he was going to run, and he bought a ticket to get there first. He pleaded guilty to all 95 counts, and he was sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms plus 25 years. So that's the whole trick, is getting somebody to show up. On the 15th of July, 2013, 13 years ago, yesterday, a magistrate judge in Washington named Deborah Robinson signed the criminal complaint and an arrest warrant for Alam Tamimi. for using a weapon of mass destruction against a national of the U.S., resulting in death. Again, as Mr. Roth explained, it was filed under seal, just like Safrani's. And on April of 2017, that same judge signed two more for the two men who murdered Christine. So people ask why Washington when Christine lived in Virginia. Again, Section 3238 of Title 18. When a crime happens outside the jurisdiction of any district, the venue lies where the defendant is arrested or where they're first brought. And when they've never been brought, the statute has a default, and the default is the District of Columbia. So the families are living inside of that rule. Now, these warrants have now been sitting in a drawer for 13 years and for 9 years, respectively. And they will keep because the murder of an American abroad is a capital offense, and an indictment for a capital offense can be found at any time without any limitation, no statute of limitations. Congress said that twice. Section 3286 separately removes the limitation period for any terrorism offense that results in death. So you asked, has this happened before? Yes, unfortunately, it happens a lot. Robert Stedham was a Navy diver who was beaten to death and dumped on the tarmac at Beirut in 1985. His killer was tried in Germany, served 19 years, and went home to Lebanon in 2005 and has never been inside of an American courtroom. Four of the five Pan Am 73 hijackers are still at large. Leon Klinghoffer was shot in his wheelchair and pushed into the Mediterranean in 1985. So these families, unfortunately, are not singled out. But hold on to Klinghoffer for a second, because that name is actually the answer to the question everyone actually came here with, which is why has nobody helped in 25 years? Leon Klinghoffer's widow sued the PLO. In 1985, there was no federal statute that let an American sue a terrorist, and she got into court only because her husband happened to be murdered on navigable waters, and the PLO happened to keep money in New York. Now, in 1991, the Second Circuit held the PLO was not immune from suit, and Congress looked at how narrow that escape had been for him, and that's why they wrote Section 233, which is the civil terrorism statute the following year. Elisa Flato was murdered in Gaza in 1995, which Congress passed the Flato Amendment in 1996. The D.C. Circuit gutted in 2004, and Congress did it again in 2008 defense bill. Taylor Force, we mentioned before, he was murdered in Jaffa in 2016, and the Taylor Force Act passed in 2018. Ari Fold was murdered outside a shopping mall in 2018, and his widow's case is the reason why the Supreme Court now says that American courts have power over the PLO. Every instrument in the toolbox is named after somebody's dead child. Not a single one of them was the government's original idea. And I hate to say this, that the honest answer is, why has nobody helped in 25 years? Nobody was ever going to help. And I hate to say this, but asking is not the right mechanism. These families are incredibly persuasive. You heard the story. They're not failing at persuasion. They're using the wrong verb. Don't ask. Right? Whose job is it to help here? Right? Department of Justice. It's their job. It's nobody else. They have to be precise here, because when you're vague, that's what lets everybody get off the hook. FBI investigates, right? The charging decision belongs to the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia and to the Counterterrorism Section of the National Security Division, which is also where the certification package for the Attorney General gets assembled. Then there's an extradition request that's drafted by the Criminal Division's Office of International Affairs, and only then does the State Department come in, and its job is to hand the extradition package to the Foreign Ministry. The State Department it's just a mail carrier, right? Justice writes the letter. So when Justice says, when State Department says this is a law enforcement matter, and Main Justice says, no, this is a diplomatic matter, they're both telling the truth and they're both lying. And that's how a case disappears for 25 years. Okay. Again, we mentioned Jordan said that its Court of Cassation ruled in 2017 that the 1995 extradition treaty was never ratified by Parliament and it can't be enforced. But as Mr. Roth explained, here's what they leave out. In 1995, under that same treaty, they extradited Iyad Ismail to the United States for bombing the World Trade Center. Right? Jordan left that out. In 2006, it extradited Mohammed Zaki Amawi. In 2015, Nadir Saada. Jordan left those out. The present king's father put it in writing that the treaty would be honored in a letter to Arnold Roth, that Arnold Roth had to sue the State Department under the Freedom of Information Act to even see that letter. Right? Jordan left that out. Our own State Department said in a published report in 2018 that the treaty is valid as to this woman, if you can call her that. Right? Jordan left that part out too. Now, I mean, there's an irony here that's actually worth 2 seconds. In 1985, a man named Fawaz Yunus hijacked an airliner out of Beirut and flew it around the Mediterranean and released the passengers. And then he held a press conference and he blew up the plane. And the 3 passengers were American. In 1987, the FBI lured him onto a yacht off of Cyprus with the promise of a narcotics deal, and then they arrested him and moved him to a Navy munition ship and then to Saratoga, then to Andrews Air Force Base. And the D.C. Circuit affirmed his conviction, and it held that American courts have power over a foreign national who hijacked a plane abroad based on nothing but the presence of American passengers. It was the first time an American court ever did that. Guess the name of the airline? Royal Jordanian. Just a fun little side thing. But all right, let me concede three things before we can talk about practical steps here, because I think people want to hear practical steps. How can you help today? First, nobody on this call can order a Jordanian judge to do anything, right? Extradition is a request. Any sovereign state can say no. Second is no. Most common question, these families cannot sue the government and force them to prosecute. The Supreme Court held in 1973 that a private citizen has no judicially cognizable interest in the prosecution of another person, and it held in a case called Heckler versus Cheney that an agency's decision not to enforce is presumptively unreviewable. So there's no courtroom where the Roths can make the Attorney General sign. Third, we cannot simply try her in absentia and be done with it, right? Rule 43 requires the defendant's presence. And in Crosby versus United States, 1993, the Supreme Court held unanimously that you can't try a defendant who was never there and that there's no fugitive exception into the rule. So someone would have to physically produce her, which is why everything I'm about to say is important. Okay. First thing you can do, you can put the man who walked out of an Israeli prison last October on the FBI's most wanted terrorist list, right? Tamimi's been on there since 2017, and the list has room, right? You can put a reward for a justice bounty on him. We've offered $5 million for Tamimi since January 2018. Same program, same authority. For both of them, for Tamimi also, you can get their Interpol red notice restored. It was canceled after her family pressured Interpol, which means that her relatives beat our government at Interpol, which is not good. And you can certify and indict. Section 2332 requires the Attorney General to certify in writing that the killing which took place was meant to intimidate a civilian population. Again, these stories you heard are horrible. Two men bound two women, took a Star of David off one of their necks and stabbed them a dozen times each because he thought they were Jews. If that certification is hard for somebody, I want to meet that somebody. But here are four things that can actually move the government today, and I want to suggest we all do them. First is the money. There's a seam in the money here. In December of 2019, Congress legislated a very important sanction. Section 7055 cuts off assistance to the central government of a country that has notified the State Department of its refusal to extradite a person who's indicted for an offense punishable by life without parole. Now, Jordan takes roughly $1.5 billion a year. Why haven't they lost that money? Here's the thing. You have to read the trigger very carefully, right? It's a notification of refusal. The thing is, Jordan has never refused. Jordan says there's nothing to refuse because there's no treaty. So the country that says there's no treaty loses no money. So Aman really read our statute more carefully than we did. So don't write a new bill, a standalone bill that's going to condition aid on this treaty. It was actually introduced in 2022. It died without a vote, which is what happens to standalone bills. But the Appropriations Act passes every single year, whether anyone likes it or not. If you're going to lobby, here's what it is. Simple fix, change one sentence in the one that passes every year, which is make the trigger failure to extradite instead of confession of refusal. That's it. Two of the four, the nomination process. This has already worked once. It's the only time in 25 years that the U.S. government told the truth about this in writing. In 2020, Senator Cruz sent written questions to the nominee for the ambassador to Jordan. And the State Department answered that the United States has multiple options and different types of leverage to secure Tamimi's extradition, and that our generosity to Jordan in military financing and economic support is carefully calibrated, right? When they asked whether the aid is part of that leverage, the nominee said he would explore all options. That sentence exists because this man needed 51 votes. That's it. Every State Department nominee that is touching the Near East or counterterrorism or the legal advisor's office, right? That's a hearing where somebody needs to answer this question on the record, right? You need one senator, one hold, no floor time, no co-sponsors, no veto to override it. Get one senator each time. Number three, arms sales. It's a lever nobody really mentions, which is under the Arms Export Control Act, the executive has to give Congress 30 days formal notice before a foreign military sale. But what actually matters is what happens before the clock starts. So during the informal review, the State Department, as a practical matter, will not send a formal notification if there's a single member of Congress that has put a hold on it. One member of Congress. We should get 20, 30, 100, 200, right? Four, and this is part of, am I running out of time? This part's very technical, but I want the lawyers in the audience to hear it because it might be the most important. Congress passed something called the Crime Victims' Rights Act in 2004, after 2 decades of failed attempts at a victims' rights constitutional amendment. Basically, it gives victims of crimes enumerated statutory rights, 10 of them, and the two that are important here are A2, which is reasonable, accurate, and timely notice of public court proceedings, A5, the reasonable right to confer with the attorney for the government in the case, and A8, the right to be treated with fairness and with respect for the victim's dignity. Again, if you're a lawyer, you probably know that there was a very famous case recently involving the Epstein victims, and they said that if there's no prosecution underway, no rights attached. But here, there is a prosecution underway. It already exists. These rights exist. We should immediately file a Crime Victim Rights Act proceeding in district court. Okay? What will that get you? A few things. Now, the government will invoke D6, which says that nothing in the act should be construed to impair the prosecutorial decision of the Attorney General. Great. That's not what we're asking. But what it will get you is an order that directs the government to designate a point of contact for these families, who's required to confer with these families and provide status updates to these families, right? Again, discretion over whether to prosecute is untouched, but the duty to talk to the victims is what the statute exists. It's not okay that nobody makes these phone calls. That itself is important. By the way, they'll try to moot out the motion immediately by calling the families. Great, that's a win. If they do start doing their job, you won't have to do it. I want to answer very, very quickly two other questions which often come up in this, which is some of these people were already tried and convicted elsewhere, right? So that's the most common objection. It's the one the defendant himself makes. Ayad Fatah's brother told the Associated Press in 2017 that the crime took place in Israel and the trial took place in Israel, and that's enough. So isn't it double jeopardy here? Right? And Tamimi has said the U.S. has no right to charge her for the same reason, double jeopardy. That is dead wrong, and it's not close. The double jeopardy clause bars a second prosecution by the same sovereign. Israel is not the United States, period. There's much more you can say about that, but I'll just skip. Pay for slay. We mentioned the fact that, the man who hurt Tal walked out of prison a wealthy man because he'd been collecting a stipend the entire time he was in prison. That stipend is why an American court now has power over the people who paid it, right? They financed their own jurisdiction. Supreme Court held 9-0 that Congress is entitled to build a statute this way because those payments are conduct that have a meaningful relationship with the United States. So the short answer is this. We have spent 25 years trying to change Jordan's mind. It's the wrong way. Change Jordan's arithmetic, right? Focusing on the money and their ability to appoint and to nominate ambassadors, etc. And again, I don't know that you'll get justice, but you might get responsibility and accountability because nobody extradites out of conscience. They extradite when the alternative gets too expensive.
Thank you, Mark. Wow, you answered any questions I had coming up. And I know, Arnold, I saw you were reacting to some of this. Have you heard this before?
I'm going to pass. There's a lot to be said.
All right.
Since you've already given me an opening, let me just say, when Mark talks about people making the double jeopardy argument, I want to put it on the record here that one of those is King Abdullah II himself, who has said numerous times in public, but there's double jeopardy. It's one of a long list of self-excusing public statements that no one ever challenges. But I've got a lot to say about what Marcus said, but obviously this isn't the place. But I thank him very much. His presentation was outstanding.
Yes, truly do appreciate it. And I forgot to mention that Mark is a rabbi also, which is why he was able to recite that beautiful prayer right when he came on. So thank you for that, Mark. We are going to take some questions from the audience. Remember, you have the ability to ask some questions. We can't take that too many because we're already running over, but I'll leave it to Maria to take your questions.
Amazing. Thanks, Cheryl. The first question from Harry Block is, please ask Tal to comment, what does justice look like for her attacker, knowing he was recently set free?
Well, just listening to Mark there, actually, I've never met Mark. It was like amazing, amazing. I'll have to listen to that like 12 times. But what justice means, Mark said a few times, it means death, right? Legally. And when I heard that, yes, my heart fluttered with a little bit of joy. I would love to see him, whatever, frazzled or hung or shot. I don't know what, injected. It really doesn't matter. So yes, I think that's the right thing to do. It's not what do you call it? Not a deterrent. It's simply the right appropriate punishment for somebody who's taken someone else's life. Now, is it justice? No, not really, because it's not going to bring back Christine. It's not going to repair the destruction that's been inflicted upon Kathleen and her family or inflicted upon myself. I'm not going to get my health back or my mental health, or, life has changed in an extraordinary manner. So it's not going to make everything right. But there will be that sense of, yeah, that feels good. That feels right. It feels right. And I'd love to see him executed. I'd fly to America to watch it happen. So that's what it means to me. I don't think there's any alternative for murder in this case, meditated murder than execution. And hearing Mark say it means death, that's really lifted my spirits. That's been worth getting up for at 2 o'clock in the morning. And on that other note, because I know you're going to finish soon, I want to echo what Arnold said, that really this is such an important grassroots initiative that Atlanta Israel Coalition has done. And also everybody who's turned up, because I've been banging my head against the wall, and this is the way forward. So I just wanted to reiterate that gratitude to everybody who's come here and to you guys who've done it all.
Great. Thank you so much for answering that, Tal. The next question is from Zach Baltimore. He says, Israel has been meticulously one by one eliminating the terrorists, especially the leaders who perpetuated the October 7th massacre. Why haven't they ever gone after the murderers discussed tonight?
Who are you asking?
I don't know that any of us are really,
That's the answer. That's exactly
yeah,
the answer.
we're
Of
not
course,
capable of answering. We don't know.
at least in my case, I can say I'm as baffled as everyone else, except that I've been going after the people who don't know how to open their mouths. And even when you confront them, all you get is just double talk. And I'm sorry if I sound bitter. I haven't even started to sound bitter.
Right. Okay, here is another question for Mark. Is there an organization already established to bring these actions you talked about? Who has standing to take these actions?
Not that I know of in particular, but where the victim is deceased or incapacitated, the statute hands the rights to family members or the estate's representatives or anyone else that the court appoints as a suitable representative. So in this case, it would be mostly the family members or people who are hurt themselves. But,
Okay, and I don't know if Mark, you would be able to answer this too. What is the status of U.S. prosecution of terrorists who murdered Americans on October 7th?
ongoing. There's a task force at the DOJ.
Okay, somebody else is also asking Mark if you can write out his your 4 recommendations. That would be amazing because then we could share that with all participants in our follow-up email. What you said was so powerful, and just like Tal, I also want to rewatch it several times, so that would be amazing.
I want to be clear that, and Mr. Roth knows this better than else, some of these things have been tried before. Some of them I haven't seen tried yet, but I want to cautiously get your hopes up that maybe they could work, but they're not magic.
Right. Okay, and then another question that came up from Andrea Grant is, can one of the speakers explain the circumstances of the actual terror attacker? Where, when, just more details.
We're not doing that on this call. If you want to look up the links, there's plenty of information out there, but we definitely didn't want Kathleen to live through it again, or Arnold or Tal. So in respect to them, we cannot talk about exactly what happened. But trust me, it was horrific, and justice needs to be served. And so each of you on here, I encourage you, we're going to be downloading this on YouTube. Share it with everyone and anyone. And we're going to keep pushing forward. We're not going to abandon Arnold and Tal and Kathleen, and we're going to keep working to get justice. And each and every one of you can help do that.
Yes, thank you. Another question is, has Kathleen, Tal, or Arnold spoken with U.S. Ambassador Huckabee or with Israel Ambassador Leiter?
Arnold, I just follow everything Arnold does. If Arnold says, I've been trying to get these people for years, I've been trying to communicate, I always go to Arnold and say, hey, Arnold, I've got an idea. Why don't, and he says, Tal, I know. So I think Arnold is the go-to here.
That's
I've
depressing.
texted these people. I haven't texted Leiter, but I've texted Mike Huckabee. It's just been ignored from start to finish, really.
Putting it that way is depressing, probably for other people in the audience, but certainly for me, because it's true what you're saying. I've met with all but one of the ambassadors of the United States to Israel in the years since Malki was murdered. Most of those meetings, and eventually when I write the opera, because eventually I'm going to write the opera, I'm going to name names and say how appalling those experiences were. Appalling doesn't even get to it. Soul destroying, sitting there in the presence of people who are diplomats in the service of the United States. And the details I'm really going to leave. But Freeman and I met with, Freeman is my wife, met with Ambassador Huckabee about a year ago now. And like all diplomats, he expressed himself articulately and warmly. Unlike the other diplomats, he actually followed up. It's an ongoing process, but it's been refreshing to be in the company of someone who actually has done a few things and has given us the sense that there's more to come. I can't emphasize enough how the real hallmark of an experience like this is loneliness, isolation. Now, I speak as well, people will wonder at the liberty I take at mentioning this, but my wife and I have a very disabled child who's not a little baby anymore. She's 31 years old. And the organization that we created when Malki was murdered was illuminated by the experience we had with that child. Her name is Chaya. The hallmark of raising a child with severe disabilities is loneliness, isolation, lack of support, running into brick walls. And it's highly parallel to what came later in our lives when we were trying to get and continue to be trying to get justice for our Malki. I should also mention that one of Malki's sisters became a widow 2 years ago when her husband fell fighting the very same monsters, Hamas, in this case in Gaza, who took Malki's life. All of those experiences, as much as we link arms with each other and say we're all in this together, we're not. In the nature of things, we're not in anything together. We sometimes overlap in some of our experiences, but at the end, we all go home and we sit down, and normally at 3 o'clock in the morning, which is what it is here now, we're left to our own thoughts. And often those thoughts are sometimes paralyzing, but more often very painful and cause the walls to sort of close in on you. I'm not saying anything in the name of the other participants here when I say this, but I doubt very much whether my experience and the way I'm saying it is very different from theirs. I'm saying all of those things because the combination of the loneliness and the reality that we're in this alone and no one is really helping, and people who are not helping are very often people who, I like to do that gesture. I call it the bomber, the jungle boy, chest beating. We're surrounded by people who are bomber, who are beating their breast and saying, "Wow, justice, the American way. Wow, getting at terrorists. Wow, no one does it bigger and better than our administration." That kind of performance is sickening. Because the reality, and I'm here to say what the reality is, and eventually, as I joke, I'm going to write the opera, which really means I'm going to start naming names, is a very difficult experience. Don't the people on the other side understand that they're making complete jackasses of themselves? Do they think that we're illiterate, that we don't talk to people, that we don't have the ability to put two and two together and arrive at conclusions that say this person is an idiot? And I'm here to tell you, no, a lot of them don't make that calculation and leave us wondering why we've wasted our time meeting with idiots. Now, not everybody I've been dealing with, I have to say, is an idiot. A very large number of them are, and almost all of them are people who really don't care about the things that they say they care about. We're there to talk about justice. Very rarely does the conversation, the dialogue, the experience lead in the direction of justice. People can make of that whatever they want. I have no shortage of energy in wanting to talk about this to any audience that will tolerate my presence. And the 25th anniversary is certainly one of those things that media people call a hook. When I've been rejected all along the way by all the major newspapers, all the major TV and other media in the United States, everyone says, oh, when there's a hook, we'll talk to you. Well, we're in the hook period right now. And I really do want people to hear the kinds of things that I've been inflicting on you, the audience here tonight, dealing with idiots, people who should be doing things who don't do things, leaving the victims to their own devices, to their own resolution of these terribly weighty issues. It's a cruel outcome. It's a punishment of unusual dimensions. And that's what the three of us, those of us who have experienced loss in a personal way, along with the tens of thousands of others who have had parallel experiences, are sentenced to undergo pretty much every day of our lives. I want to just mention one final thing here before I stop this rant. We have a petition. There are over 30,000 names on that petition. I wish that there were 30 million names on the petition, because then I wouldn't get the looks of pity and disdain that I get when I meet with American politicians. I'd like to throw it on the desk and say, here's 30 million people who've said, you people have wasted everybody's time. You should have been doing what's in this petition. Now do it. But we have 30,000 names. Everybody on this call can, and I hope will, sign the petition. There's nothing political about it. It simply calls to action the State Department of the United States, which has the particular burden of carrying this into the world of diplomacy. As for the Department of Justice, we're not calling on them to do anything, but we have and always have had an open channel to the Department of Justice. But please sign the petition. Do we have the address here on the screen? I just haven't seen it. Otherwise, I'll just read it out. So I'll just say
Yes,
it.
I've
Change.
actually shared the petition link throughout the chat for
Okay, thank you.
Balky
Thank you.
Roth and also Christine Lucan. So those are in the chat. And I encourage everybody to take 30 seconds to fill it out and also share it with your networks, put it all over your social media. Like Arnold said, it is not political, but it is humane to demand accountability. And I also just want to thank Arnold, Kathleen, Tall for your bravery, continued bravery, sharing your story, and Mark Goldfeder for sharing your legal expertise. And I also want to especially thank the community partner organizations who helped make this event possible and promote it. We will be sure to share the webinar recording and helpful links with all registrants. And thank you everyone so much. I'll turn it over to Cheryl for any final words.
So I want to just say that, Arnold, I never, ever could imagine. So you're absolutely right. We are not all in this together, but I am here. And anything I can do for any of you, I promise I'm here for you. We are not ending this today with this call. We're continuing. And you, the viewer, if you're listening, which I hope you are, not only sign the petition, talk to your officials, ask them what they think. Have they heard of it? Make sure you keep bringing this up, because Christine and Malky, they deserve to be remembered and fought for. They really do. And each of you have the opportunity to do that. If you have connections in the media, Arnold has just offered to speak to them. I know Tal would be happy to speak to anyone, just to make sure that people are aware of what's been going on. the reality is, if there are no consequences, the terrifying thought is that there's no reason for this nightmare to end. Americans should be protected by our government, and we need to hold them accountable to do so. So thank you all for joining, and thank you everyone for being here. And I wish you a good night. Until the next time, thank you.